Rain and ruin, the autumn storm had turned Carson Springs into a misery of mud and cold. James Thornton pulled his coat tighter as he stepped from his mining office. Ledgers and contracts finally sorted after 12 hours of work. His empire mines, ranches, timber operations stretching across 3 territories demanded constant attention. Constant decisions. Constant loneliness he refused to name. He nearly missed her in the downpour. A woman sat on the stone steps outside his building. Dress soaked through. Dark hair plastered to her face. She wept into her hands with the kind of abandon that came from believing no one could see. Rain poured over her shoulders, pooling around her skirts. She didn't seem to notice. James recognized her immediately. Catherine Merrill, one of his company clerks. Sharp with figures, quiet in manner, always professional. He'd approved her hiring himself 6 months ago. Miss Merrill. His voice cut through the rain's roar. She looked up, eyes red and swollen. Horror crossed her face at being discovered. She tried to stand, stumbled, caught herself against the wet stone. What happened? James descended the steps, propriety forgotten. Why are you out here? Her voice broke. Please, Mr. Thornton, just let me. You're soaked to the bone. He gripped her elbow, steadying her. You'll catch your death. Come inside immediately. I can't go back in there. Fresh tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. Everyone saw they all inside. Now. James rarely used his command voice outside business negotiations, but he used it now. Whatever this is, you won't solve it by drowning in a storm. Catherine had no strength left to argue. She let him guide her up the steps, through the heavy oak door, into the warm gaslit lobby. Water dripped from her clothes onto the polished floor. She stood shivering, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. James bolted the door against the storm. His secretary had left hours ago. The building was empty, except for the 2 of them, and whatever terrible thing had driven this woman to sit, weeping in the rain. My office, he said quietly. There's a fire. You need to get warm before you tell me anything. She followed like a ghost, leaving wet footprints on the carpet. In his office, James stirred the coal fire and pulled a chair close to the warmth. Catherine sank into it, still shaking. He poured brandy from the decanter on his desk. Drink this. She took the glass with trembling hands, sipped, coughed. Color began returning to her face, but the devastation in her eyes remained. James sat across from her and waited. He'd learned patience in business. Some truths couldn't be rushed. Finally, Catherine spoke. I've been dismissed, Mr. Thornton. Today, an hour ago. On what grounds? His voice went cold. Incompetence, the letter said. Her laugh was bitter as winter wind. Though we both know that's a lie. Then tell me the truth. Catherine's hands tightened on the glass. Your operations manager, Mr. Burton, made certain advances. I refused them. He dismissed me for it and escorted me from the building like a common thief while every woman in that office watched. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. James felt fury building in his chest, white-hot and barely controlled. He stood, paced to the window, stared out at the rain-lashed street. You're certain of this? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Catherine Merrill had worked for him long enough. She wasn't given to dramatics or false accusations. I'm certain, sir. James turned to face her. Then you're coming inside tomorrow morning. Burton won't be. The truth comes out. James didn't wait for morning. He returned to his desk and wrote 3 quick notes. The first summoned Burton to the office immediately, regardless of the hour. The second directed his head of security to escort Burton from the premises after their meeting. The third requested his attorney's presence first thing tomorrow to handle the dismissal paperwork. Catherine watched him write, confusion replacing some of the despair in her expression. Mr. Thornton, what are you doing? What I should have done the moment I hired Burton. James sealed the letters with wax, his movements sharp with anger. I ignore the day-to-day operations too much. Trust my managers to act with honor. Clearly that was a mistake. You're going to fire him, tonight if possible. James met her eyes. I won't have men like that representing my company. More importantly, I won't have them preying on women under my employ. 20 minutes later, Burton arrived. The operations manager was a tall man with an easy smile that James had always found slightly false. That smile vanished when he saw Catherine sitting by the fire. Mr. Thornton, I wasn't expecting... Miss Merrill has informed me of your conduct. James remained standing, arms crossed. Do you deny making improper advances toward her? Burton's face reddened. Sir, I don't know what she's told you, but do you deny it? A pause. Burton glanced at Catherine, then back at James. His expression shifted from defensive to calculating. She misunderstood a friendly gesture. Women in the workplace often misinterpret. You're dismissed. James's voice could have frozen the fire. Effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal effects. You have 10 minutes. You can't be serious. Burton took a step forward. Over the word of some clerk who... Get out of my building. James moved between Burton and Catherine. Before I forget I'm a gentleman and throw you out myself. Burton's face contorted with rage. But he saw something in James's expression that made him back toward the door. You'll regret this. Thornton, choosing her word over mine. The only thing I regret is not seeing what you were sooner. Leave. When Burton was gone, escorted by security. James returned to Catherine. She hadn't moved from the chair, but she was staring at him with something like wonder. Thank you, she whispered. James shook his head. Don't thank me for doing what's right. Now, let's discuss your reinstatement. I'll give you Burton's salary if you'll take over some of his administrative duties. You're more capable than he ever was. He expected relief, gratitude. Perhaps. Instead, Catherine's face crumpled. I can't go back there. Mr. Thornton. What do you mean Burton's gone? You're vindicated. Am I? She stood, setting the brandy glass aside with careful precision. Every woman in that office watched me escorted out like a thief. They'll know Burton was fired immediately after. They'll draw their own conclusions, and none of those conclusions will restore my reputation. James frowned. But you did nothing wrong. That doesn't matter. Catherine's voice was gentle now, explaining something she understood that he didn't. A woman's reputation isn't about truth, Mr. Thornton. It's about appearance. And the appearance is that I was involved with Burton. That something inappropriate happened. That I'm somehow tainted by this entire mess. That's ridiculous. That's reality. She moved toward the door. Thank you for the justice, Mr. Thornton. Truly. But justice doesn't restore what's been taken. I'll find work elsewhere. In another town, perhaps. She reached for the door handle. Wait. James's mind raced. He thought of his empty house, his grieving children, his mother-in-law struggling to fill Sarah's place. He thought of this woman's dignity, her intelligence, the unfairness of a world that punished virtue while excusing vice. An idea formed, impulsive and probably foolish. Don't go yet, he said. I have another proposition for you, an impulsive offer. Catherine turned back, wariness in her eyes. Mr. Thornton, I appreciate your kindness, but my wife died 2 years ago. The words came quickly, before James could reconsider. Sarah. Pneumonia took her that first winter after Thomas was born. Left me with 2 children who need more than I know how to give them. Catherine's expression softened. I'm sorry for your loss. My mother-in-law, Margaret Garrett, lives with us. She's wonderful with Emma and Thomas, but she's not young anymore. The children need proper education, structure, a woman's guidance. James heard himself talking faster, ideas tumbling out half-formed. Come work for me directly. As their governess. Live at Thornton Estate. Margaret will serve as chaperone. Your reputation will be protected. As what? Exactly? Catherine's tone was careful. Your children's governess people will assume worse. Mr. Thornton. A young woman living in a widower's house. Regardless of chaperone. Then let them assume. James felt his frustration rising. You need employment and a place to live. My children need education and care. It's a practical arrangement. Practical for you. Perhaps. Catherine's laugh was bitter. But I've just learned how quickly practical arrangements can become scandalous. What happens when someone suggests I'm there for more than teaching? When the gossip starts, that I'm your mistress pretending to be a governess. James hadn't considered that. His privilege showed. He realized, as a man, as a wealthy landowner, he could make such arrangements without consequences. Catherine couldn't. Margaret's presence, he began, will help, but won't eliminate talk entirely. Catherine shook her head. I appreciate the offer, truly, but I won't trade one ruined reputation for another. They stood in silence, rain hammering against the windows. James thought of going home to his hollow house, his sad children, his own loneliness. He thought of Catherine walking out into that storm with nowhere to go, no prospects, punished for refusing a villain's advances. It wasn't right. None of it was right. Where will you go? He asked quietly. Tonight. Do you have family? A boarding house until I can arrange travel to Denver? My sister lives there. And until then you have money for lodging. Catherine's silence answered him. James made his decision. The estate has a guest cottage. You'll stay there tonight, out of this storm. Tomorrow, in daylight, with clear heads, we'll discuss options. If you still want to leave for Denver, I'll arrange travel and give you enough wages to start fresh. Mr. Thornton, please. He met her eyes. Let me do this one thing right. You've been wronged by my employee, in my building, while under my protection. Allow me to offer you safe shelter for one night at least. Catherine studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. One night. Then I'll leave without burdening you further. It's not a burden, James said, but Catherine was already moving toward the door. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. James's carriage waited under the building's awning, his driver dozing on the box. As they drove through the dark streets toward his estate in the hills beyond town, James watched Catherine stare out at the passing buildings. The rain had stopped completely by the time they reached the estate gates. Catherine looked up at the clearing sky, at the first stars appearing between clouds, and something in her expression shifted. Maybe. James thought. Maybe this could work after all. He just had to convince her of it. Sanctuary morning sun transformed Thornton Estate from a dark silhouette into something Catherine hadn't expected, a home rather than a mansion. The main house sprawled comfortably across a hilltop, white clapboard and stone, surrounded by autumn gold aspens that whispered in the breeze. Outbuildings dotted the property: stables, barns, a bunkhouse for ranch hands. Mountains rose behind it all, purple with distance and early snow. Catherine had slept in the guest cottage, a small structure with its own fireplace and comfortable bed. She'd woken disoriented, momentarily forgetting the previous day's disaster, then remembering with a sick lurch. But sunlight through lace curtains and the smell of coffee from the main house made the world feel less catastrophic than it had in the rain. A knock at the door. Miss Merrill, I'm Margaret Garrett. The woman who entered was perhaps 60. With silver hair pinned neatly and kind eyes that assessed Catherine without judgment. She carried a tray with breakfast and a simple brown dress draped over her arm. James told me what happened, Margaret said, setting the tray down. I'm sorry, child. Men like Burton should be horsewhipped. Catherine blinked at the casual vehemence. Thank you. Mrs. Garrett. Margaret, please, we're not formal here. She held up the dress. This was my daughter's. Sarah. It should fit you well enough until we can arrange something better. I couldn't. You can and you will. Now eat your breakfast while it's hot. James is at the office, but the children are eager to meet you. If you still want to meet them, that is. Catherine had intended to politely refuse James's offer and leave this morning. But something about Margaret's straightforward kindness, the sunshine, the smell of bacon and coffee, made her pause. He really meant it about the governess position. James doesn't say things he doesn't mean. Margaret sat in the other chair, watching Catherine with those assessing eyes. The children need you. Emma is 10, bright as a new penny. But she's forgotten how to laugh. Thomas is 7 and still asks when his mama's coming home. I do my best. But they need someone younger. Someone who can give them proper schooling and attention. And you'd truly be comfortable with me living here. More comfortable than watching those babies grow. Upsad. Margaret's voice was firm. James explained the situation. You did nothing wrong, yet you're being punished for it. That's not justice. If we can offer you shelter and purpose while protecting your reputation, why wouldn't we? Catherine felt something loosening in her chest. People will still talk. People always talk. But they'll have less to say if you're living properly chaperoned, teaching children, acting in all ways as a respectable governess should. Margaret smiled. Give it a trial. 1 month. If it doesn't suit you, James will help you get to Denver with enough money to start over. But at least give it a chance. After breakfast, Margaret led Catherine to the main house. The interior was comfortable rather than ostentatious worn rugs, overstuffed furniture, children's drawings pinned to the kitchen wall. It felt lived in, loved, though shadows of grief lingered in the empty spaces. The schoolroom was on the 2nd floor, windows overlooking the aspen grove. Books lined the shelves, slates and chalk waited on desks. A globe sat in one corner. Dust motes danced in the morning light. Sarah used to teach them here, Margaret said quietly. But after she died, I couldn't seem to. She stopped, cleared her throat. Well, it's been neglected. But it's yours now, if you want it. Catherine touched the books, the desk, imagining filling this room with children's voices and laughter. Imagining purpose again. I'd like to meet Emma and Thomas, she said. The children appeared shy and solemn, dressed neatly but hovering near Margaret like small ships afraid to leave harbor. Emma had dark braids in her father's serious gray eyes. Thomas was smaller, freckled, clutching a wooden horse. Catherine knelt to their level. Hello, I'm Catherine. Your grandmother tells me you might need a teacher. Are you going to live here? Thomas asked, direct as only children could be. I might, if that's all right with you. Will you read to us? Emma's voice was soft. Mama used to read every night. Catherine's throat tightened. I'd be honored to read to you. That afternoon, she started lessons tentatively. Mathematics first, basic sums for Thomas, more complex problems for Emma, then literature, geography, natural science. The children were bright and hungry for learning, though grief still shadowed their eyes. That evening, as Catherine prepared to return to the cottage, Thomas appeared in the schoolroom doorway. He held out a book, worn and well-loved. Mama's favorite, he said. Will you read it tonight? Catherine looked at the title. Poetry. Wordsworth. She glanced at Margaret, who nodded encouragement. Of course, Catherine said. Get into your night clothes and I'll read in your room. Later, sitting between the children's beds, reading about daffodils and wandering clouds, Catherine felt something shift. Thomas fell asleep clutching his wooden horse. Emma listened with closed eyes, breathing evening slow. When Catherine finished, Emma whispered, Will you be here tomorrow? Yes, Catherine said, surprising herself. I'll be here tomorrow. Walking back to the cottage under stars, Catherine realized the weight on her chest had lightened. Maybe sanctuary was real after all. Months of small moments winter arrived with the first snow in November, and Catherine discovered that healing didn't announce itself with trumpets. It came in quiet moments, accumulated like snowfall. 3 months passed in steady rhythm. Catherine woke each morning to frost on windows, walked to the main house through crunching snow, started the schoolroom fire before the children arrived. She taught mathematics and literature, history and science, but also practical things: how to mend a fence, identify animal tracks, understand the stars Thomas loved. Emma revealed a gift for drawing. Catherine encouraged it, bringing her charcoal and paper, praising the careful sketches of horses and mountains that grew more confident each week. Thomas proved brilliant with numbers but struggled with reading until Catherine realized he needed things explained through stories, not rules. Margaret became more than chaperone. She was friend, mentor, the mother figure Catherine had lost young. They baked bread together, discussing everything from ranch management to philosophy. Margaret spoke of Sarah sometimes, not with bitterness but warm remembrance, making space for Catherine without erasing the past. James remained distant at first, leaving early for his office, returning late, but gradually, imperceptibly, he began coming home earlier. First for dinner, then in time to hear the children recite their lessons. Catherine would look up from Emma's drawing or Thomas's astronomy chart to find him watching from the doorway. December brought deeper cold. One evening, Catherine sat in the parlor reading poetry while Emma sketched and Thomas built an elaborate fort from wooden blocks. The fire crackled, throwing warm light across the room. Outside, snow fell steady and silent. James came home earlier than usual, stamping snow from his boots in the entry. He paused in the parlor doorway, taking in the domestic scene. Catherine glanced up from her book, offering a small smile. "They've been good today," she said. Emma finished 3 drawings and Thomas conquered long division. "Did not conquer," Thomas protested, not looking up from his fort. "I defeated it in honorable combat." Emma giggled, the sound still rare enough to be precious. James smiled, something easing in his face that Catherine had learned to recognize. He looked less like a land baron in that moment and more like a father who'd forgotten how to be one. "May I join you?" he asked. "Of course," Catherine said, surprised. "It's your home." James settled into the chair across from her, close to the fire. For a while they sat in comfortable silence, the children absorbed in their play. Catherine returned to her book, but found herself distracted by James's presence, by the way he watched his children with such tender attention. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For this, for them, I'm their teacher. It's my job." "It's more than a job." James leaned forward, elbows on knees. Emma's laughing again. "Thomas doesn't ask when Sarah's coming home anymore. And this house feels—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "It feels like a home again instead of a museum of grief." Catherine didn't know what to say. The moment felt fragile, important in ways she couldn't name. Then Emma climbed off her chair and crossed to Catherine, not James. She settled into Catherine's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world, resting her head against Catherine's shoulder. "I'm glad you came to live with us," Emma whispered. Catherine's throat tightened. She wrapped her arms around the child, feeling Emma's warmth, her trust, her acceptance, over Emma's head. She met James's eyes. What she saw there made her breath catch. Not gratitude or relief, but something deeper, something that looked almost like Thomas's fort collapsed with a clatter. Breaking the moment, the boy laughed at the destruction, already rebuilding. Emma slid from Catherine's lap to help him. James cleared his throat and stood, suddenly awkward. "I should check the evening ledgers," he said, though it sounded like an excuse. After he left, Catherine sat very still, her heart beating strangely fast. Margaret appeared in the doorway, having witnessed everything from the kitchen. She said nothing, but her knowing smile spoke volumes. That night, alone in her cottage, Catherine acknowledged what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was happy here. Truly, deeply happy in a way she hadn't expected to feel again after Burton's betrayal destroyed her life in town. The children had become hers in all but name. Margaret was family, and James Catherine pressed her hands to her warm cheeks, not ready to examine that thought too closely. Outside, snow continued falling, blanketing the world in white silence. Inside, safe and warm, Catherine let herself hope that sanctuary might become something more, something permanent. The gossip-begin spring came late to the mountains, arriving reluctantly in mid-March with muddy roads and stubborn patches of snow. It also brought the necessity of going to town. The Thornton household had survived winter in comfortable isolation, but supplies were needed. Business required attending, and church couldn't be avoided forever without causing more talk. So, on a Sunday morning, Catherine found herself in the ranch wagon beside Margaret, following James's carriage into Carson Springs. "Remember," Margaret said quietly, "hold your head high. You've done nothing wrong." Catherine nodded, gripping her reticule tightly. She'd known this moment would come. 3 months of sanctuary couldn't last forever. The trouble started at church. Families who'd once smiled politely at Catherine now stared openly. Women whispered behind gloved hands, their eyes following her up the aisle. When Catherine slid into the Thornton family pew, the family directly in front shifted away. As if scandal were contagious, Emma noticed, "Why is Mrs. Patterson sitting so far away?" "Hush," Margaret said. But her voice was tight with anger. During the service, Catherine felt every stare like a physical touch. The sermon about Mary Magdalene seemed pointed, though Reverend Matthews had probably planned it weeks ago. After the final hymn, women gathered their children quickly, pulling daughters away when Emma tried to approach. "Sarah Mitchell can't play today," one mother said loudly. "We have family obligations." The lie was transparent. Sarah Mitchell looked confused, then hurt when Emma's face crumpled. Thomas gripped Catherine's hand tighter. "Why don't they like us anymore?" he whispered. James's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. What could he say? The truth would only hurt more. At the Mercantile afterward, the situation worsened. Mrs. Henderson, the merchant's wife, served Catherine with thin-lipped disapproval. When Catherine selected fabric for a new dress, Mrs. Henderson's voice carried across the store. "I suppose when a woman's living in a man's house, she can afford nicer things than honest wages would buy." Catherine's hand froze on the fabric, around them. Conversation stopped. Everyone waited to see how she'd respond. James stepped forward. "Careful, Mrs. Henderson. That's my children's governess you're slandering." "Of course, Mr. Thornton." Mrs. Henderson's smile was poisonous. "Your children's governess. How convenient." They left quickly after that, the wagon loaded with supplies and bitter silence. Emma cried quietly into Margaret's shoulder. Thomas asked questions no one wanted to answer. James drove with white-knuckled hands, fury radiating from every line of his body. Back at the estate, Catherine excused herself to her cottage and didn't emerge for dinner. She sat on her bed, staring at nothing, feeling the fragile happiness of the past months crumbling. She'd known this would happen. Deep down, she'd known. Scandal didn't disappear just because you hid from it for a season. 3 days later, Reverend Matthews visited the estate. Margaret received him in the parlor, while Catherine kept the children occupied in the schoolroom. But voices carried through old houses, and Catherine heard enough. "I'm not suggesting Miss Merrill is immoral," the Reverend said, "but surely you understand how it appears a young unmarried woman living in a widower's household with me as chaperone." Margaret interrupted, "With complete propriety in all things. Nevertheless, the appearance creates difficulties. Several families have expressed concern about their children associating with Emma and Thomas. The situation affects the children's social standing. Catherine's stomach turned to ice. She looked at Emma and Thomas, bent over their lessons, innocent of the poison spreading through adult conversations. They would suffer because of her. Already were suffering. That evening, after the children slept, Catherine made her decision. She found Margaret in the kitchen, measuring flour for tomorrow's bread. "I have to leave," Catherine said without preamble. Margaret's hands stilled. "No." "Yes." "You heard Reverend Matthews? The children are being ostracized because of me. I won't let them pay for my scandal." "It's not your scandal. You did nothing wrong." "That doesn't matter." Catherine heard the echo of her own words from months ago. Some things never changed. Reality doesn't care about innocence. I should never have stayed this long. Catherine. "I'll go quietly. Tell the children I had family business. They'll forget me eventually." Margaret set down the flour, dusted off her hands, and looked at Catherine with an expression somewhere between sadness and steel. "You're wrong about one thing," she said. "Those children will never forget you. And neither will my son-in-law, whether he's admitted it to himself or not." Catherine felt tears prickling. "Then I'm hurting them by staying. Can't you see that what I see is a woman letting cruel people win?" Margaret gripped Catherine's shoulders. "But if you've made your decision, I won't stop you. Just promise you'll say goodbye properly. They deserve that much." Catherine nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She returned to her cottage and began packing her trunk. Tomorrow morning, before dawn, she'd leave. Back to Denver, to her sister, to starting over once again. Outside, the moon rose over mountains still capped with snow. Spring had come, but for Catherine, winter had returned. Dark night Catherine woke before dawn to find Emma sitting on the floor beside her trunk. The child's face was tear-streaked, her nightgown wrinkled. She must have been there for some time, watching Catherine sleep, waiting for her to wake. "You're leaving," Emma said, not a question. Catherine's heart cracked. "Emma, how did you—" "I heard you and grandmother last night." Emma's voice was small, devastated. "You're leaving because people are mean to us at church, because of the gossip." "Sweetheart, don't go." Emma crawled forward, gripping Catherine's hands. "Please don't go. I don't care what Mrs. Henderson says. I don't care if Sarah Mitchell won't play with me. I need you." Thomas appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He saw the trunk, saw Emma crying, and his face crumpled. "No," he said, rushing forward. "You can't leave. You're our teacher. You're—" His voice broke. "You're the only mama we have now." Catherine pulled both children into her arms, her own tears falling freely. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, but don't you see if I stay? You'll be outcasts. No one will want to be your friends. It's not fair." "But life's not fair." Emma's voice was fierce through her tears. "Mama dying wasn't fair. But you don't run away from unfair things. You fight them." The commotion woke the household. Margaret appeared first, wrapping her shawl tighter against the pre-dawn cold. Then James, still buttoning his shirt, his hair disheveled from sleep. He took in the scene immediately, Catherine kneeling with both children clinging to her. The packed trunk. Everyone in tears. "What's happening?" he demanded. "Miss Catherine's leaving." Thomas sobbed. "Because people are mean." James looked at Catherine. Something blazing and desperate crossed his face. "Is that true? I have to," Catherine said, trying to sound firm despite her tears. "You heard Reverend Matthews. The children are suffering because of me. I won't let them be outcasts because of scandal I brought with me. You didn't bring scandal." Margaret's voice was hard as granite. "Burton created it. Cowards in town perpetuate it. You're the victim, Catherine. Don't let them make you the villain too. I'm trying to protect Emma and Thomas. By abandoning them. James's voice cracked like a whip. By teaching them that when people are cruel, you run away. That's not fair. Catherine protested. No, it's not fair. James crossed to her, pulled her to her feet. Emma and Thomas clung to her skirts. Nothing about this is fair. Not what Burton did. Not how the town's treated you. Not my children losing their mother and now losing you too. James, I failed you. Her. The words seemed torn from him. Twice. First. I didn't understand how reputation works for women. I thought justice meant firing Burton and offering you work. I was naive and privileged and blind. Second, I hid behind propriety instead of standing up for you when gossip started. I let you face it alone because I was too cowardly to... He stopped, something shifting in his expression. Because I was too cowardly to admit what I was feeling. The cottage fell silent except for the children's sniffling. Catherine stared at James, her heart hammering. What are you feeling? She whispered. James looked at his children, at Margaret, at Catherine. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. I'm feeling like I've been given a second chance at having a family. And I'm about to lose it because I'm too afraid to fight for it. I'm feeling like somewhere between October and now. You stopped being the governess and became... He stopped. Swallowed hard. Essential. To my children. To this household. To me. Emma tugged on Catherine's skirt. Papa, make her stay. You can fix anything. James looked at his daughter, then back at Catherine. Something resolved in his face. A decision made. Walk with me, he said. Please. I need to show you something. James, it's barely dawn. Please. His eyes held hers. Before you leave, just give me this. Catherine looked at Margaret, who nodded. She looked at the children, who released her reluctantly. She looked at James, at the desperation and determination in his face, and found herself nodding. All right, she said. Show me. They left the cottage together, walking into the pale pre-dawn light. Behind them, Margaret gathered the children close. Give them time, she murmured. Some things can't be rushed. Thomas pressed his face into her side. Will she stay? Margaret thought of James's expression, of Catherine's tears, of the way two broken people had found each other in a storm. I think, she said carefully, your father's about to do something very brave. Let them talk. James led Catherine to the garden behind the main house, where Sarah had once tended roses. The garden was waking with spring. Early crocuses pushed through the last patches of snow, their purple and white blooms defiant against lingering winter. The sky was lightening in the east, painting the mountains gold and pink. Sarah planted these, James said, gesturing to the crocuses. Every fall. She'd put in new bulbs. Said she needed the promise of spring to get through winter. He knelt, touched one delicate bloom. After she died, I couldn't look at this garden. Too painful. But this year, they came up anyway. Life insisting on itself despite grief. Catherine hugged herself against the morning cold. Why are you showing me this? Because I've been living in winter for 2 years. James stood, facing her. Frozen, going through motions, existing but not alive. Then you came, crying in the rain, and something started to thaw. James, let me finish. He took a breath. I told myself I was helping you for practical reasons. You needed work. My children needed teaching. But that wasn't the whole truth. Somewhere in these past months, I stopped seeing you as the governess and started seeing you as... He struggled for words. As the woman who makes Emma laugh, who taught Thomas the constellations, who bakes bread with Margaret and reads poetry by the fire. As the person who brought warmth back into this cold house. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. That doesn't solve the problem. People will still talk. The children will still suffer. Then we change what they're talking about. James moved closer. I've been a coward. Catherine. Hiding behind propriety, behind the governess arrangement, behind every excuse to avoid risk. But watching you pack that trunk, seeing my children's faces, I realized I'm about to lose everything that matters because I'm too afraid of gossip to claim what I want. What do you want? Catherine whispered. James took her hands. His were warm despite the cold morning air, steady and sure. I want you to stay. Not as governess, not as hired help, as my wife. Catherine's breath caught. What? Marry me. The words came stronger now, more certain. Be Emma and Thomas's mother in truth, not just practice. Be my partner in all things the estate, the business, the life we build together. Let me protect you properly, not with half measures and chaperones, but with my name and my commitment. The gossip will be worse, Catherine protested, even as hope blazed in her chest. They'll say you married me out of obligation, or lust, or let them talk. James's voice was fierce. Let them talk about Mrs. Thornton, my wife, mother to my children. Let them say I was smart enough to marry a woman of virtue and intelligence. Let them say I recognized grace when I found it crying in the rain. But let them say it about my wife, not some scandal. Catherine searched his face. Is this really what you want? Or are you just trying to fix another problem? It's both, James admitted. Yes, marriage solves the reputation problem. But Catherine... He cupped her face in his hands. I'm asking because somewhere between October and now, I fell in love with you, with your strength and dignity, with the way you love my children, with your kindness and intelligence and the poetry in your voice when you read. I'm asking because I want to spend my life with you, and I should have had the courage to ask weeks ago. The sun broke over the mountains, flooding the garden with light. Crocuses glowed like jewels. Catherine felt warmth spreading through her chest, thawing the last frozen places. I love you too, she whispered. I've been trying not to, trying to keep proper distance. But I love you and Emma and Thomas, and this life we've built. James kissed her. Gentle, reverent, full of promise. When they parted, both were crying and smiling. Is that yes? He asked. That's yes. Catherine laughed through tears. Yes to marriage, to family, to facing gossip together. Yes to everything. They stood there in the garden, holding each other while the sun rose. Behind them, the cottage door opened. Emma and Thomas burst out, followed by Margaret at a more dignified pace. Did she say yes? Emma shouted. Is Miss Catherine staying? James turned, keeping one arm around Catherine. She said yes. And you should probably start calling her mother. The children shrieked with joy and ran to them. Catherine caught them both, laughing and crying at once. Margaret approached more slowly, her smile warm with satisfaction. Welcome to the family, she said, officially this time. They returned to the house together as morning light turned the snow-covered mountains golden. Inside, Margaret made coffee while James sent his ranch foreman to town with news there would be a wedding. Soon, at the estate. Guests were welcome if they wished to come. Those who didn't could stay away with his blessing. Let them talk, James said again, pulling Catherine close while the children danced around them. We'll be too happy to care. New morning, 3 weeks later. The garden bloomed with more than crocuses. Margaret had worked magic, transforming Sarah's garden into a wedding bower. Apple trees wore clouds of white blossoms. Tulips lined the paths in red and yellow. A simple wooden arch stood at the garden's center, wound with fresh greenery and wildflowers. Catherine wore Sarah's wedding dress, altered to fit her slighter frame. Margaret had offered it with tears and blessings, saying her daughter would have wanted this. The ivory silk caught the afternoon light, simple and elegant. "You're beautiful," Emma whispered, adjusting Catherine's veil. The girl wore a new dress of spring green, her dark braids wound with flowers. "Mama would have loved you." Catherine squeezed Emma's hand, too overcome to speak. The ceremony was small. A few friends attended ranch hands who'd known the family for years, the doctor who'd delivered both children. 2 families from church who valued decency over gossip. Most of Carson Springs stayed away. But Catherine didn't care. The people who mattered were here. Reverend Matthews performed the service with good grace, having been firmly reminded by Margaret that Christianity included forgiveness and redemption. He pronounced them husband and wife as the sun broke through morning clouds. James kissed his bride with Emma and Thomas cheering beside them. Margaret wept happily. The small gathering applauded. Afterward, they returned to the house for a simple meal. The children devoured cake while adults toasted the couple with cider. James kept Catherine's hand in his, as if afraid she might disappear. "Happy," he murmured. "Impossibly happy." Catherine leaned into him. "Is this real? If it's not, we're sharing the same dream." As afternoon faded to evening, guests departed with warm wishes. The ranch hands returned to the bunkhouse. Margaret herded the children upstairs to bed, giving the newlyweds privacy. James and Catherine walked to the garden one last time, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The same sky where months ago, Catherine had sat crying in the rain. The same stars that had witnessed her despair and rescue. "Do you ever think about that night?" Catherine asked. "When you found me on those steps, every day." James wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I think about how close I came to walking past. How different everything would be if I'd been too focused on my own concerns to notice your pain. I think about how close I came to refusing your help." Catherine leaned back against him. "Pride and fear almost cost me everything." They stood quietly, breathing in honeysuckle and spring air. Somewhere in the house, Thomas laughed at something Margaret said. Emma's voice called out a question. The sounds of family, of home, of life continuing forward. "We should go inside," James said, but neither moved. Catherine thought about the journey from rain to sunshine, from ruin to redemption. She thought about Burton's cruelty and the town's judgment, about children who needed love and a man brave enough to offer it. She thought about second chances and the courage required to accept them. "The gossip hasn't stopped," she said quietly. "Mrs. Henderson still sneers at me in town. Half the church thinks I'm a schemer who trapped you, and the other half thinks I'm a fool who married out of pity." James turned her to face him. "Let them think what they want. We know the truth." "What's the truth?" He smiled, touching her face with gentle fingers. "That I found you crying in the rain and you changed everything. That my children have a mother again. That this house is full of life and laughter. That I wake up happy for the first time in 2 years. He kissed her forehead. "That I love you more than I knew I could love anyone." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but happy ones this time. "That's a good truth. The best one." James took her hand. "Come inside, Mrs. Thornton. Our family's waiting." They walked back to the house together, leaving the garden to its blooming silence. Inside, lamplight glowed warm through windows. Emma and Thomas had escaped Margaret's supervision and were peeking over the upstairs railing, giggling at the newlyweds. "Come upstairs," Emma called. "We want to show you something." Catherine glanced at James, who shrugged with good-natured surrender. They climbed the stairs together, following the children to their rooms. Emma had made a drawing the whole family standing in the garden, surrounded by flowers. Thomas had written across the top in careful letters, "Our new family." "For you," Emma said shyly. So you remember today forever? Catherine knelt, pulling both children into a fierce hug. I could never forget, not today, not any of this. She looked up at James, at Margaret hovering in the hallway, at the home they'd all built together. This is everything I never dared to hope for. Later, after the children finally slept and Margaret had retired to her rooms, James and Catherine stood at their bedroom window overlooking the estate. Moonlight silvered the aspens. The mountains stood eternal against the stars. The rain stopped months ago, Catherine said softly, but only now does the sun feel truly warm. James wrapped his arms around his wife, his face pressed to her hair. No more storms, he promised. Not for us, not anymore. But even as he said it, they both knew life would bring challenges. Gossip would persist. Difficulties would arise. The world outside their sanctuary wasn't always kind. None of that mattered. They had each other, the children, Margaret, this home they'd fought to build. They had love earned through hardship and proven through courage. Catherine Thornton, wife, mother, beloved, turned from the window and smiled at her husband. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, they were home. She took James's hand and led him from the window, closing the curtains on the watching stars. Behind them, the house settled into contented silence. The children dreamed peacefully. Margaret smiled in her sleep. Outside, spring continued its patient work, coaxing life from frozen ground, proving that winter always ended and warmth always returned to those brave enough to wait for it. And in the morning, the sun would rise again, as it always did, on a family made whole.